Good afternoon, race fans, and welcome back to TRTN for today's coverage of the HCCL Multiclass Championship Season 3 Round 2. As always, I am Regan Clark. You join us here in the second part of the championship of 8 rounds available in Season 3 right here at the former home of the United States Grand Prix in the world of Formula 1 and a cutthroat circuit from the world of American endurance and stock car racing, the Watkins Glen International Circuit. Founded in 1956 as a permanent circuit with history dating back to 1948, it's 11 turns and 3.4 miles of FIA Grade 2. Despite its time in the limelight as a foothold for American sort of prowess in Formula 1 and then later on in IndyCar, Watkins Glen distinguishes itself from having earned its stripes primarily through the cutthroat lens of stock car and endurance racing. It remains strikingly faithful to its 1971 long course layout, save for the introduction most recently in 1992 of the inner loop chicane between turns 4 and 5. Nonetheless, it is a fantastically old-fashioned circuit here, a proper hit of old-school American racing, and it makes for round 2 of this fantastic championship, reeling from what was a sensational opener back in Barcelona. Taking a look at the calendar, of course, we find ourselves here at round 2. 2 more rounds before the season midway at Paul Ricard on January 31st. We're in for a double set of American races. Following on from this is the home of American motor racing at the second oldest ever dedicated racing course in the world, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That's round 3 of the championship. Today, however, we're right here in Schuyler County, New York State, right here at Watkins Glen. It is going to be a fantastic round to follow up from what round 1 gave us. Taking a look at those championship standings, we take a look straight in to what the first round has given us across the board. Starting off in GT3, Dion Helgalian leads the charge in the GT3 category ahead of Mr. Scallops in second place. Giacomo Marianelli third place with Ferrari and Steven Sutton in fourth. Anthony Valorio makes the top 5 with Pascal Stoltz in 6th place. Luca Tamburini makes 7th place ahead of Alexander Hivrich in 8th. And heading towards the back of the top 10, Corey Aiken in 9th place. Currently behind Hivrich by a single point. Rounding out the top 10, Ben Knights with 11 points. Same story looking into the GT4 standings. We find here Vladislav Mizin on his inaugural win in round 1. Takes him to the top of the charts ahead of Matthias de Munster for a Mercedes 1-2. Then Tom Wells with Ginetta in 3rd place ahead of Marco Gaioliolo in 4th with Alpine. Mercedes again into the top 5 courtesy of Roman Zhdanov in 5th place. Zhemak Sulim with Aston Martin 6th ahead of Sergei Olan in 7th with BMW. Andrew Canoro on your screens at the moment finds themselves in 8th place in the championship ahead of Odaris Castillo to make the top 9. And so, reeling from those previous wins, of course, the GT3 class went to Dion Helgalian, a resounding victory for the American racing with Ford, and Vladislav Mizin took his first race on the inaugural round of the championship. First race win, I should say. Taking a look into balance of performance, we find ourselves looking down the sights of 2 broadly different situations across the board from GT3 to GT4. Starting with the GT4s on our screen at the moment, we see a plethora of vehicles, but a huge wad of neutral traffic in the middle. Chevrolet, BMW and Mercedes all gaining and losing nothing. We will just double check and verify that this is all still correct. We were a little bit scrambled to try and get all of this prepared in due course. And yes, it is all still up to date. So we do find a considerable chunk of cars stuck in the middle. Chevrolet, BMW and Mercedes. Alpine gain a single kilo with McLaren gaining 7, Porsche gain 13. And then in the negatives, Audi lose 2, Ginetta lose 3, KTM lose 7 and Aston Martin, best in class, lose 18 kilos. Moving across the board then from away from the GT4s over to the GT3s, we see here with Mr. Scallops second in the championship and on the podium on debut to Season 3. Of course, not his debut to the championship at large, very far from it, as a matter of fact. On his first race in Season 3, he started things off on a very solid note for 2026. Looking at the GT3 balance of performance, we see that there is not anywhere near as much neutral traffic, but there are more negligible changes in store, namely from Porsche all the way to Ford. I would even say as far to rope in McLaren as negligible changes there, with only 4 kilos on the 720S at the very worst end of it. Nissan gain a single kilo, so insignificant changes for Mr. Scallops. It has not stopped him so far from taking the fastest time so far in free practice. More onto the session itinerary in a moment. Ford gained 3 kilos, McLaren gained 4. And then we see the minuses. Ferrari and BMW both lose a single kilo. Porsche lose 3. And then the more significant changes, Ferrari's 488. GT3 Evo, that's Anthony Vallorio's choice of vehicle. We saw him to the top 5 in Barcelona. He loses 18 kilos for this race. The Jaguar XKG3 of Pascal Stoltz set to lose 40. Business as usual then for Emil Frey Racing Jaguar. We see here with Mr. Scallops. Sadly, no qualifying data to bring up yet again here. It's been a little too scrambled to get sufficient data as to who to watch out for. We can sample through the data later on, but we don't have anything to show on screen. So reeling in from was a fantastic opener to this championship. Let's get a look at the session. So 20 minutes of free practice, 20 minutes of qualifying, of course, still staggered. First 10 minutes is GT3 qualifying only. Last 10 minutes is GT4 qualifying only. One mandatory pit stop for both fuel and tyres, and the race length at 60 minutes. Taking a look at the new drivers for this round of the championship, we find returning faces from the GT4 challenge, such as Asahi Ota and Matthew Copsey. We also see new drivers like Ryan Chaparro-Roulant, Dennis Gonzalez, and Willow Taylor. So hopping straight back into the session, of course, just 8 minutes through on free practice. We see there Stephen Sutton across the line up to 4th from 7th. Looking at the session so far, 11 times on the charts. Leading the charge so far then, Mr. Scallops ahead of Dion Helgelian. Anthony Vallorio 3rd place, Stephen Sutton most recently we saw there up to 4th. Alexander Hivrich in 5th, Pascal Stoltz in 6th, Isaiah Palacios in 7th place. Antonis Korkomelakis in 8th place. And then into the GT4s, we see the fastest 3 are all manufactured by Mercedes. Matthias de Munster, Andrew Canoro and Dennis Gonzalez. See here, Lisi still out on track at the moment. Drivers still in the pit lane. Shulim, Chaparro-Roulant, Ota. We see there the return of Asahi Ota, now sporting the 33 in this championship. Also in the pit lane, Stephen Black. We also see there Tom Wells and Odaris Castillo. See, this is Modest Ark in the number 222 on his way out through turn 5. We'll get a full breakdown of the track in due course. You see here, last round's race winner, Dion Helgelian. Down towards the line he goes then. 3rd place after that last lap just gone. Not an improvement of position, was about, looking at it there, just under 0.06 of a second off of his personal best. We see here trouble for Lisi in the number 24 Ferrari. Nicholas Lisi seemingly out of the session, it looked like there. We've just cut across over to Przemek Sulim, just as we leant down to try and find our notes just here. We now come back into the pit lane. We see this is Przemek Sulim in the pit lane with Aston Martin. You will have to forgive me. I am starting to come a bit under the weather in the last couple of days. It is starting to have a little bit of an effect. It is flu season, of course, in the UK, where we're recording from. We see here Asahi Ota out on track. It's fantastic then to see the Aston Martin back into the swing of things in GT4. Of course, last time we saw him was back in the Carousel Cup mini-series. Brand new number, though, for the Japanese talent. 33 this time around. We've seen him with 55. We've seen him, I believe, with 555 at one point. Even with the number 5. And now it's 33. Curious one indeed for the Aston Martin. See there, Anthony Vallorio just coasting his way around Asahi Ota in towards turn 9. On his tail there, you can see the Alpine Marco Gaioliolo. I must say, the featherweight cars that we saw out of last round in Barcelona really did put on quite a spectacle. Now, if we go and cut on board with some of them, we can see here Tom Wells down towards the line, about to set what looks to be his first time on the charts. Across the line he goes, and in division, oh, it was no time there, so it must have been an outlap for the number 12. But yes, to pick back up on this as well, the featherweight cars like the Ginetta, and moreover like cars like the Porsche we see here driven by Modest Ach on his first race of the season, Marco Gaioliolo on his second race with Alpine, they actually did remarkably well in that opening round, both of them securing positions in a decent stead of the top 5. So we'll catch on board here with... let's go and catch with the nearest car to line. We see the number 69, Matthias de Munster with Mercedes AMG. He'll be our unofficial tour guide here at Watkins Glen. So taking us down towards turn 1 at the 90. Right off the bat, this is of course the international long course circuit that was introduced in around 1971, still remarkably close to that design, making our way out through turn 1 into turns 2, 3 and 4 at the S's. Out through turn 4. Now this is where we start to see a lot of those side-by-side moves come to a head here, following each other out through turns 2, 3 and 4. We've seen it plenty of times before here at Watkins Glen, down towards the inner loop chicane, a part of the track that technically isn't counted towards the turn count, still residing at only 11. Out through turn 5 at the outer loop. Heading up over this crest here, very easy for the car to come asunder in wet weather. We've seen it historically here at Watkins Glen, up through to turn 6 at Chute Curve. Now into a section known as the boot, starting things off here at the toe of the boot at turn 7. This open hairpin uphill right-hander. We see a little bit wide there for de Munster with Mercedes. And on the run down the boot straight, as it were, on the run in towards the heel, an open right-hander, almost an open hairpin right. It's sort of more of a long sweeping right-hander. Cambered in, and now this is one of the best things about Watkins Glen is its use of cambering, and it has quite a few corners that are on camber, a sprinkling of corners that aren't, but for the majority of it you have a lot of rotational power, even in cars that don't otherwise have that on paper. It's what makes this such a fantastic circuit in stock car racing, and why it's been part of stock car racing for going on 70 years. Out through turn 11 we go, then down towards the line by Matthias de Munster. Fastest in GT4 at the moment. Across the line he goes, and it was a 155.440, his personal best of the session so far, 154.858 in the 69 Mercedes AMG. We see here Vladislav Mizin. Now he caught on with the GT3 winner from last round. Now we see here Vladislav Mizin on his way down towards the line, or should I say in towards the pit lane for the number 2. Curious one indeed. Making his way back towards pit row. Mr. Scallop's now fastest in the session, holding on to that. The 1:45.147 his fastest time so far. Nissan could be gunning for GT3 victories here in Watkins Glen. It would be much to the chagrin of the Ford, the winner of last round in Barcelona, Dion Helge-Leon. This would really be quite a gratifying win at home here for Helge-Leon, and Ford for that matter. Right now they find themselves pushed all the way out of the podium as Pascal Stoltz takes third fastest with Emil Frey Racing Jaguar, Anthony Valorio with Ferrari and the 488 GT3 Evo, and then fastest in the session so far is the Nissan GTR, the 2018 model Nissan GTR, driven by Mr. Scallops. Now, it is definitely the day of the oddball when you consider these are all older, less than meta machines. The Nissan really coming into its own in the last couple of months. We've seen it in a few different series, including this one, and moreover, the Ferrari 488, I don't think we have seen that since, I want to say about season 2, perhaps even season 1 of the TRR Sprint series. So that is really, in terms of the lifespan of HCC, that is yonkers ago by this point. As for the Jaguar, well, we had a whole series dedicated to the Jaguar, of course, over on Competizione Performance League, and it was a fantastic series in its own right. Now we get to see what Pascal Stoltz can do, and we saw a sort of a kindling of that performance start to peek through in the Carousel Cup here on HCCL, where he took the podium in the GT3 category. And it's going to be quite curious to see how that unfolds. We see most recently then Dion Helge-Leon up to third fastest. And still off by just over 3/4 of a second, almost at half a second, 3/4 of a second to pole position. That could feasibly put him in and around half a second to Anthony Valorio, currently second. Really, it is Nissan's game to lose here on the run into qualifying. Now, bear in mind, of course, just to bring back up the session itinerary away from the new drivers in this race, we bring up the session itinerary to see that the first 10 minutes will be the GT3s and the last 10 minutes will be the GT4. So not a lot of time to play with, all things considered. 20 minutes in all for this session to follow. Of course, some of you may be joining us over from what was the 3 hours of Kyalami in the AXRL Multiclass Madness mini-series. You joined us earlier on today from where we're recording, at least from 8 AM Greenwich Mean Time. Closest gap now starting to develop here inside of the top 5. Alexander Hivrich, third fastest with McLaren, up by a single hundredth of a second over Helge Lien. Meanwhile, in GT4, Asahi Ota takes second fastest and not too far off a shout here by about 142 thousandths of a second behind Matthias de Munster. Now, that splits the crowd of the two Mercedes cars, but I believe we have still yet to see much of Vladislav Mizin. Very clear signs now with his second visit to pit row that this may be sandbagging by the Ukrainian. And of course, the runner-up in that championship back in the GT4 Challenge, both he and Asahi Ota clashed heads with Christian Lebay for that title. Ultimately, it went to Lebay. And it's not to take away from what is going to be an absolute riot with these two off by their lonesome. Let's not rule out, though, Matthias de Munster. He has definitely brought a lot to the table in terms of the championship so far. Second in the championship, right behind Mizin. A Mercedes 1-2 out of Barcelona. There is a lot to consider coming up into this. And for the GT4s, at least in terms of local history here on HCCL and the High Caliber Community League, this represents their first opportunity to enter the history books here. There is no data given to us or given out ahead of this event of anyone winning in GT4 here at the Watkins Glen International Circuit. Now, conversely, different story for GT3. Looking back up towards the front of the GT3 field, Mr. Scallops is in, Anthony Valorio still in. It leaves Alexander Hivrich off by his lonesome, but stuck behind there, the 55 of Andrew Canoro. The last GT3 winner here at the Watkins Glen International Circuit was the Alien Rage Racing Team during the Driver Swap Series back in Season 1. So the GT4s, conversely, have no series to go off of. We didn't visit this in the GT4 Challenge, nor did we visit it, obviously, in the Carousel Cup. Would have been a bit of a bizarre field trip, as it were, away from Nürburgring. The last two times we've seen the GT4s here on HCCL, even in the previous series ran in Season 2 of the Multiclass Championship, we did not see anything out of Watkins Glen International. So this is history in the making for the GT4s and their representation in the High Caliber Community League. This is going to make for quite an interesting race indeed, especially when you consider the margins right now are so fine between Mercedes and Aston Martin, much closer than they are up in the upper echelon category of GT3. We are seeing quite a swarm of sandbagging here right towards the very end of free practice. Into the pits goes Matthias de Munster. Satisfied with the pace he's put on the table so far. Bear in mind, we could still see times north of what both of these two have set towards the front of the GT4 field. So, of course, this is all that builds up into the main event of qualifying. That prelude into an hour of racing yet again here in the Multiclass Championship. Down towards the line, nearest to it is Palacios with BMW. From 9th place up to 8th there ahead of Antonis Kokomilakis. And the number 4 right at the very end there. You see Kokomilakis on the way out through turns 2, 3 and 4 with Porsche. That is a mighty pretty livery there on that Porsche. You can see, though, the main issues for Porsche are starting to creep up out through those curbs. It's a little flaky around the edges when it comes to the stability out through the inner loop chicane. Now, it can be make or break. We've seen right now, front engine seems to be the word forward across both categories. They crave stability on a track almost designed for the most feral of touring machinery, the stock car, really the most bare bones a race car can get in its time. Of course, NASCAR is fundamentally different from what it was back in the 50s, but this track didn't lose its mentality. The world changed around it, and it really wasn't one to change itself. You see Dion Helgalian, third fastest at the end of free practice, dead on level with Anthony Valorio. Now that is the closest gap by a long shot. Previous closest gap was 0.03 of a second between Aiken and Stoltz. Now it's Helgalian and Valorio dead level, right at the very end of free practice, right onto the advent of 20 minutes of qualifying. Or staggered qualifying session to remind you as well. GT3's out first, GT4's out second, so we'll wait to see exactly what goes on this paddock, but things are going to get lively in a moment's time. We do see the number 2 has already finished their session, Vladislav Mizin, yet to have put a time on the chart, so definitely a bit of sandbagging here from round 1's race winner in GT4. It's going to be curious to see what he can do right here in Watkins Glen. One of the cornerstones of American stock car racing history. It was also home of the American Grand Prix, or the United States Grand Prix more relevantly, in some of the most dangerous years to be a Grand Prix driver in Formula 1. Nearest to the line then, the number 91, Przemek Zulin with Aston Martin. Waiting for that start of qualifying. The 91 out through turn 11. We'll see what they can do over the course of the coming qualifying session, but without further ado then, staggered qualifying. So first 10 minutes goes over to those GT3s. Next 10 minutes will go over to the GT4s. We see already out of the pits, not wasting any time whatsoever, is Mr. Scallops with Nissan. Now he's hunting down a race win today. That is the determination we're seeing from the 394. He's not going to be playing second fiddle to anyone, let alone the round 1 race winner, Dion Helgalian. We've seen the enthusiasm right off the bat, and we've seen it in execution. Scallops has this one nailed in the bag by the looks of things here, but let's see how far that gets him with a significantly less amount of time, half the amount of time to be more specific than what he had in free practice to put those times on the chart. Can push really come to shove for the Nissan? Sadly, with no qualifying data to go off of this time around, with insufficient amount of drivers entered into the qualifying data, we are in this alone. Realistically, we can gun it by eye. With good intuition, we've got high hopes looking at Mr. Scallops at a potential pole position. He's definitely shown the signs of it right off the bat in free practice. Of course, it is free practice. At the end of the day, it is a time where teams can experiment with setups, can experiment with race load, just to make sure the car is feeling nice and safe for the actual race ahead. It's not always just a preliminary qualifying session, so this is really when we start to see the cars get their elbows out. We'll see here from Mr. Scallops. We'll stay on board with the round 1 podium sitter. Let's see what he can do. See, joining us in chat there, Buster T16 and Tom Breuer. Of course, Tom Breuer, the winner of the HCCL Carousel Cup, joining us in the Twitch chat. On board then with Mr. Scallops for the first of our flying laps here in qualifying for round 2 of Season 3, right here at Watkins Glen, the HCCL Multiclass Championship. Listen to the sound of that. One of the most iconic V6 engines ever manufactured, the VR38 DETT. Such a versatile platform, mind you. The same underpinnings as the engine you could find in an Infiniti Q50. And then at the more extreme end of the scale, you could find it in the Dacia Sandrider in the Dakar Rally. We talked about that earlier on. Over the course of the AXRL 3 hours of Kyle Army, we discussed how over the course of Stage 6, Nasser Al-Attiyah now leads in a Dacia 1-2. That uses a VR30 DDTT engine, which is still powered by the same underpinnings you'll find in this engine right here, the VR38 DETT. Already support there for Scallops by Tom Breuer. Of course, Tom Breuer himself drove a Nissan to victory in the Carousel Cup in the GT3 division. Out through turn 8. High hopes for Jaguar as well. Pascal Stoltz did give quite a solid look of things throughout that pre-qualifying free practice session. It really does seem to be the day of the oddballs here in the heart of American stock car racing. Let's see, first onto the charts then, after what looked like an exhilarating flying lap out of Mr. Scallops, heading down towards the line. Let's see what the time is looking like. Across the line he goes, and a 1:44.945 in the background there. We can see approaching the line Stephen Sutton. Right behind him is Anthony Valorio. So 2 more times to join the charts. We see in the background there Pascal Stoltz and Alexander Hivrich. Valorio second fastest. Stoltz across the line, doesn't put a time in. Hivrich does. Aiken follows, now third fastest. It's a Ferrari 2-3 at the moment. Nissan leads by 167 thousandths of a second. The number 1 coming to the line. We'll try and catch on board here. Jaron Martin making his way down through to turn 11 with McLaren. Hot on his trails there, the 45. That's Dion Helgelien, last round's race winner. High hopes there for him to return to the front row. Cross the line then. Martin 5th. Helgelien to the line. And 4th there, only for Dion Helgelien. Next to the line we saw in the background, that was Luca Tamburini. Across the line he goes, 6th fastest. From behind him there, we also saw the 707, I believe that is there, the Ferrari of Stephen Black. Still yet to have put a time on the charts. You can see brand new paint scheme for the 707 as well. New colours. Do like a new paint scheme every now and again. Across the line a moment ago from behind him as well, the number 4, Antonis Korkomelakis with Porsche. So coming back to the line out of turn 9, we see here the 394 still leading the session by just over 1/10 of a second, just shy of 2/10. Heading in towards turn 10 and 11. See there, was that perhaps a little too far over the line? Doesn't look to be the case. He's still slingshotting out through turn 11. On his way down towards the line. Can it be an improvement? Further down into the 44s, yes it can, by half a second, no less. 1:44.447. Next to the line, the number 7, here comes Stephen Sutton, better late than never. Next onto the charts, third fastest, Pascal Stoltz from behind him. Let's see what Jaguar can do, it's third fastest. Alexander Hivrich to the line from behind Stoltz, stays 7th. The 41 coming to the line, Anthony Valorio. Needs to find something and something fast here. 0.6 of a second he needs to find away from Mr. Scallops. Couldn't find it on that last lap just gone. Now we cut on back on board here with Jaron Martin. On his trails there, you can see just hanging in behind him the 45 of Dion Helgelien. Martin down to the line, Helgelien in tow. Martin 10th, Helgelien 6th. What can Martin do after that last lap? Not an awful lot there. Stays in 10th, but Helgelien shoots up from 6th to 3rd. The 813, Luca Tamburini to the line from 9th place on the field. Goes up and ahead of Korkomelakis. From behind him, the BMW of Isai Palacios. 7th fastest, Korkomelakis to the line from now 10th place. Goes back up to 9th. Mutual exchange there of position. The 707 across the line a moment ago. And Stephen Black 2 times on the trot now. Can't find any times. Well, he's only got 3.5 minutes left to go here. When we hit 10 minutes left to go, the GT4s will be let loose onto the track. And believe me, they are waiting. And see already, that's Zhemak Sulim actually pointing in the direction of the pit exit. He is waiting now to charge his way down. Now, we saw a perfectly timed exit back in round 1 for the GT4s. We'll see if we can find that perhaps again. Heading back to the line. Here comes the Nissan. We already saw an improvement on the last lap. That was by half a second. What can he find on this one? Down towards the line, 0.4 of a second. So he just keeps building on that. The Nissan has so much upward momentum to carry here. It was up by, and really take an aggregate of it, just under a second in 2 laps. 172 across the line, back up to 3rd goes Pascal Stoltz. We see there Corey Aiken now up to 3rd from right behind Alexander Hivrich, now up to 8th. 41 coming to the line, here comes Anthony Valorio. And again, no dice on that one. He's 130 thousandths of a second. Sorry, no, 70 thousandths of a second. Again, maths, terrible. 70 thousandths of a second away from the nearest car. That's Corey Aiken making a Ferrari 2-3 at this time. And he finds himself a second and 900ths away from Mr. Scallops. Couldn't find a single thousandth over it. The 45 across the line a moment ago. Dion Helgelien takes 4th, back off of Pascal Stoltz. Both of them relegated from outside of the podium. These two separated by barely anything between them. Taking a look there, it's about 130 thousandths of a second between 4th and 5th alone. The number 4 coming to the line. We see Antonis Korkomelakis from behind Isai Palacios. Goes up and ahead of Palacios now to 7th. 707, can it finally be 3rd time's the charm here for Stephen Black? Across the line, 12th fastest. Better late than never in this case. 7.5 seconds away from pole position. In relative terms, about looking at it here, 2.6 seconds away from Jaron Martin in 11th place. Out through to turn 11. This is Mr. Scallops. 394, still gunning for gold here, and he's leading by a landslide with Nissan. This is setting up a very good charge into round 2 today, and he's up by even more into the 143.9s now. 1.152 seconds away from Anthony Valorio in second. Down towards the line. Next flurry of times here, Sutton and Stoltz. Sutton stays in 6th place. Stoltz stays in 5th. Aiken in 3rd at the moment across the line. From behind him there, we see, believe that to be Jaron Martin, stays in 11th place. We can see off in the distance there the arrival of the 41 Ferrari 488. Anthony Valorio. Again, no time found ahead of his own personal best. It is plateauing for Ferrari at this time. Neither of them able to make a budge with inside that second. 45 of Helge. Bear in mind, looking at the gap there, 63 thousandths between himself and Aiken, and he leapfrogs both Ferraris up to 1.102 seconds away from pole position. Now puts himself up the road by 5 hundredths over Valorio. The number 11 coming to the line right at the very end here of the GT3 portion of qualifying today. Palacios across the line. Can't find any dice there over Korkamalakis. Stays in 7th place. Across the line they go. The 707 not far from the line as we speak. This will be their last lap to go, as now we see what looks to be a timed release there. Marco Gagliolo followed by Matthias de Munster. Then on their trails as well, I believe that is, yes, Dennis Gonzalez. New to the field there in the number 14. 41 calls it quits there, back into the pit lane. Anthony Valorio starts on the 2nd row. 394 still out on track. Mr. Scallops has done more than enough to secure his lead of things for the run into round 2's race. Across the line he goes. Can he find one last improvement? Sadly, not this time around, but he's done more than enough in our eyes. Number 7 coming to the line, Stephen Sutton. We'll be catching on board with the GT4s in due course. We're seeing just the end of the GT3s here. Their way down to the line, Sutton from 6th place up to 5th and ahead of Pascal Stoltz. Last driver to make their way to the line looks to be Antonis Korkamalakis. Not far off his trails at the moment. We can see a whole swarm of GT4s not far away at all. A single corner, mind you, between themselves and the trailing Porsche. Out through to turn 8 we go. So Mr. Scallops definitely had more than enough capability there. With half the time he had in free practice, secures away a lead in qualifying by 1.1 seconds. Helge Leon second. This is going to make for an incredible starting grid coming up later on in 8.5 minutes. Sadly, no articles of news to discuss today. After that point, we see Korkamalakis in the pit lane contempt with 7th place. That leapfrog over Isai Palacios is going to give him that primary control of the 4th row. It's going to be curious to see what he can do then on what is technically his first race of the championship after missing out in round 1. Getting on board then with the first of the GT4s to take to the field here. You see it was an early door start by Gagliolo, but the 2 Mercedes cars have now usurped the Alpine for the lead of the charge of GT4s. We're going to see down towards turn 1. Hopefully, if we can catch on board by the time they take turn 1 here. It's getting a little bit sluggish as we try to catch with Matthias de Munster. Dennis Gonzalez right behind him, Marco Gagliolo 3rd, and then Przemak Sulim to make the 4th time on the charts if they are to carry on in this order. Mercedes already look incredibly strong today. They're reeling from a 1-2 in Barcelona. They lead the championship 1-2, Mizin to de Munster. That's another thing to consider as well. Vladislav Mizin very late out into the tide of GT4s. You can see he's on the mini-map there, just on the exit of turn 7, on the run in towards turn 8, down at the heel in the boot section. Stay on board here with de Munster. It's going to be curious to see how things unfold for new drivers on the field there. Few names to bring up over the course of this qualifying session in the next 7 or so minutes. Among them, we can see first in the fray just behind Matthias de Munster, the fellow Mercedes of Dennis Gonzalez, the number 14, new to the field for round 2 of the championship. It's going to be interesting to see where this all unfolds. Of course, Mercedes have cemented themselves so far the dominant manufacturer on the grid in the absence of Chevrolet, which dominated the season back in the GT4 Challenge. Mercedes have now taken the vacant throne for themselves. The exit of turn 8 in towards turn 9, Matthias de Munster leading ahead of Gonzalez, number 2. So I'm told they're now starting their flying lap. That's going to be a very curious one indeed. We saw sandbagging throughout free practice for Mizin, the round 1 GT4 race winner in Barcelona. Let's see what the first flurry of times are looking like in terms of the GT4s. Leading that charge then for the baseline, Matthias de Munster. Round 1's podium sitter, P2 at the end of Barcelona. To the line he goes then, to be the first time onto the charts. De Munster fastest by default. Gagliolo, 2 seconds off there. Actually 1.5 more realistically. 55 coming to the line from behind them. Andrew Canoro, Division 4th. The 222 coming to the line. Modest Ak with Porsche. From behind them there we can see Odaris Castillo. Ak 5th. Now pushed down to 6th by Castillo. Ryan Cheprontier-Roulance was momentarily, I should say, 6th, but now pushed down to 7th by Tom Wells. We're about to see the arrival then of the number 2. Yet to see times then by Gonzalez and Shulim. The number 14 and the number 91. Sahiota, I should say as well, snuck his way through in that charge of cars to make second fastest so far, ahead of Marco Gagliolo. Let's see what Mizin can do on his first flying lap. Down towards the line he goes. And by looks of it there, couldn't put a time in the number 2. Curious indeed for Vladislav Mizin. Whether or not it was a case that he had to restart his outlap, nonetheless, we'll catch on with Mizin towards the end of the next. We see Matthias de Munster currently fastest, really not too far at all off of him by 49 thousandths of a second. Is Asahi Ota. Incredibly close stuff there, even closer when you consider the second row. The 2 featherweight cars, Alpine and Ginetta, separate by 3 thousandths of a second. Wrap your head around that one. The gap between Wells and Gagliolo on 3rd and 4th place in division. That is truly remarkable. Well, we're going to see then down towards the line comes Marco Gagliolo with Alpine, sandwiched on either side by 2 Aston Martins. Does Ota take fastest? Yes, he does. Taking a look at the gap there by just shy of half a second over Matthias de Munster. Number 70 coming to the line from behind the 222. So we see Modestach and Odaris Castillo on their way to the line. Big shift in position there for Castillo. Division 3rd for Aston Martin. Number 12 coming to the line. Here comes Tom Wells. Can he get up and ahead of Marco Gagliolo? Yes, he can. And moreover, he can get up and ahead of Odaris Castillo to 3rd in division with Ginetta. The chances are still there for fight back by Alpine, but they've been shown up by Ginetta. Dieppe versus Leeds. It still remains the case here. The GT4 Challenge's scourge of qualifying. The number 2 of Vladislav Mizin still waiting on a new time here from the Mercedes. Hopefully we're treated to one as he makes his way down towards the line. Now let's see what the deciding factor is in qualifying for the number 2. It's fastest and by 4 tenths and 47 thousandths of a second. That is truly quite remarkable there. That's entering with a bang in the number 2. Oh, pardon me. Looking at things at the moment throughout the GT4 qualifying, we come into the last flurry of times not far from now. Leading that charge still is Matthias de Munster in the 69 Mercedes. Next onto the charts once again. Previous lap having back onto the top 3, just up the road from Tom Wells by a factor, looking at it there, of looking about 40, I think it was 43 thousandths of a second. Moreover, that has since expanded, and moreover as well, you see that's Dennis Gonzalez into 4th in division. Gagliolo overtakes Wells. Then we see Asahi Ota. Can there be fight back for the lead of GT4? Not this time around, but he's still got one more lap to play with too if he properly puts the hammer down. 222 coming to the line. Modest Ach with Porsche. See in the background there, Ryan Charpentier Roulant. The 777 behind him, Tom Wells. What's the fight back chances here by Ginetta across the line? Tom Wells does find an improvement on his time, puts himself within 600ths of a second to Marco Gagliolo. The two featherweights battling at the back of the top 5 in qualifying. It's going to make for an incredible start on this grid. 5th and 6th, that third row is going to be ultra competitive. Right now, it's a Mercedes all second row. It's a Mercedes 1-3, moreover, a 1-3-4 in that top 5 alone. Mercedes hold majority power. Number 2 comes into the pit lane. No, he doesn't. I saw him slowing down out of turn 11. Was very curious to see what Mizin was doing. Across the line he goes. Doesn't find an improvement over that last lap, namely because taking a look at the telemetry, last lap was invalidated for Vladislav Mizin. That does not take away from what he's been able to do in one lap there. Number 69. Now in 3rd. Following on his trails, you see in the background there, I believe calling it quits might be Gonzalez. No, as a matter of fact, he's got time for it, so this will be the deciding factor here. Does he go in for one more flying lap, or does he call it quits here on what has been already a great opening qualifier, 4th in division so far? He's going to choose the former, and he's gunning for one more lap. Moment ago across the line was Matthias de Munster, maintains 3rd place. And then we see that taken off of him by Przemek Zulim, Polish driver in the number 91 Aston Martin. Now 3rd in division. Aston Martin 2 and 3. Seems like a war here amongst the AMG engines. Mercedes versus Aston. Bear in mind, and I'm sure I've said this plenty more times than I care to allow, but that Mercedes and that Aston are using functionally the same engine. The Mercedes M178 4-litre twin-turbo V8 engine was loaned out to Aston Martin as an export variant called the M177 that's used in these modern V8 Vantages. So up until there, where we just saw Tom Wells enter the fray with his 3.7-litre V6 manufactured by Ford, we were about to see an all-top 5 of only AMG engines. A curious case indeed. Tom Wells punching well above his weight with Ginetta as always. And this is classic Tom Wells behaviour when you consider as far back as the GT4 Challenge, where that Ginetta was the plucky underdog of the grid week in and week out. Coming to the line, the number 2, Vladislav Mizin. Doesn't find an improvement over his fastest. Not that he needs to. He's done more than enough to secure that 0.4 of a second. Dominance by the number 2. Looking at consecutive wins, but he's got an hour of racing to decide that. 69. Coming up towards turn 8, 9 and 10 here. 9, 10 and 11, I should say. Following on his trails, the number 14, Dennis Gonzalez. Gap between himself and Tom Wells at the back of that top 5. Really only in and around 63 thousandths of a second. So super small gap to be considered. Moreover, for Matthias de Munster, he's calling it quits. Into the pit lane goes the 69. Does the number 14 follow? He sure does look that way. He tried his best there. Gonzalez at the best of times, starting from the 3rd row, 6th place in division. See, coming into the pits, there goes Asahi Ota. Giving it his all there, starts from the front row of GT4, has ample chance to fight with Mizin. These two understand each other's game implicitly. Remaining car then. Coming into the pits, Marco Gagliolo. Well, what a qualifying session indeed. And this is set to be a fantastic race to come up on after Barcelona. A brilliant qualifying on both fronts there. GT3 and GT4 were up in the air for quite some time. But as push comes to shove, it's Scallops and Mizin, the fastest in both categories. So looking at it at the moment, we'll get a full breakdown of the grid in due course. Sadly, no articles of news to discuss outside of what was mentioned earlier on today in the AXRL 3 hours of Kyalami. We're on to an hour of racing to follow here now to bring back up the session itinerary one last time. Of course, coming out of 20 minutes of qualifying today, we find ourselves looking down the sights of another 60 minutes of racing like we did back in Barcelona. One mandatory pit stop for both fuel and tyres to be considered across the board. And to bring back up that previous point, for the GT4s at least, this is the opportunity to make HCCL history. The GT3s, the previous winner in GT3 here at Watkins Glen was Alien Rage Racing Team back in Driver Swap Series Season 1. The GT4s really stand the chance to be the first among the fray here into those history books. The next time we visit Watkins Glen will be likely in some reference to talking about the previous winner, which will be decided today down in that GT4 category, and they have plenty of sizable candidates for the job. We'll get a look at the grid in a moment's time when they form up for round 2. Looking back to the calendar as well, of course, we're just on the advent of round 2 of the championship. Then we'll be heading to another fantastic American venue at round 3, the home of American motor racing at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. More to follow then in the next week. But right now, here's your grid for round 2 of Season 3 of the HCCL Multiclass Championship. Mr. Scallops on pole position in the GT3 category, and alongside him, last round's GT3 race winner, Dion Helgalian in the 45 Ford Mustang. Anthony Valorio and Corey Aiken make it a cross-generational Ferrari second row with the 488 and the 296. Rounding out the top 5 and starting that third row, Stephen Sutton ahead of Pascal Stoltz in the Milfrey Racing Jaguar XK. Antonis Korkamelakis in 7th ahead of Isai Palacios in 8th place. Alexander Hivrich in 9th with Luca Tamburini rounding out the top 10. And rounding things out into a nice 6th row, we find Jaron Martin and Stephen Black. That's all 12 cars then for the GT3 field. Getting on to the topics of GT4, we find Vladislav Mizin on pole position alongside him, Asahi Ota, two old rivals of the HCCL GT4 Challenge. Zhemak Zulin behind them on the second row alongside Matthias de Munster for an all-Mercedes top 4 in terms of engines. Tom Wells interrupts what could have been an all-AMG engine top 5 with the titular Ginetta 5th place in division and starts ahead of Gonzalez in 6th. Gagliolo in 7th with Alpine ahead of Ach in 8th. And 9th there for Odaris Castillo, 10th for Andrew Canoro. Rounding out the 11 positions that comprise GT4, we have Ryan Chaparentier Roulants. Well, we'll catch on board with Mr. Scallops, the one leading outright with that 394 Nissan as we head on to the formation lap. We'll leave you on board with the Nissan for just a moment's time and we'll be back. So over the course of the formation lap, we see here all 23 cars on this grid, GT3 and GT4 alike. In the topics of where to expect the majority of your overtakes, of course, turn 1 is a likely culprit every time, no matter the circuit, but the 90 has proven to be a challenging corner. The only saving grace then of that 90-degree right-hander is an excessive amount of runoff, and we've seen in NASCAR before that they really do like to take some creative liberties with track limits out through turn 1 on the race start. Hopefully we're not to see much of that in the GT3s and GT4s of today's grid here in HCCL's Multiclass Championship. Down towards the inner loop chicanes where we could definitely see a daring few try their luck to get side by side with their opponents before leaping it up through this section, but we've seen that it has proven to be ample territory for incidents. Out through turn 5 we go. It'll be the run down towards turn 6 where the next proper opportunity would arise across the board. GT3 and GT4 alike can definitely have a swing down through turn 6. here on the exit of turn 5. And this is what I'm talking about. The cambering here does allow drivers to get very lead-footed in through that first sector, really slingshot the car out. It's what makes the track so dangerous when wet weather plays its hand. Fortunately today, it looks like dry weather for the hour of racing ahead of us here in round 2. Just sort of studying on board here as well. You can see almost every corner on this track is cambered in, allowing drivers to sort of tuck in almost on the apex of the corner. It does create this very unique ebb and flow to the track that you don't often get in other American circuits that are a little bit more flat. Properly old school, of course. All of this would have been a proper consideration when designing the circuit. We are told of a potential disconnect, and we have now been confirmed that Luca Tamburini will start from the pit lane due to a disconnect in the 813. Super Motorsports in chat asking, will there be rain? Well, currently, if you check the top right there, no chance in the next 30 minutes. We'll get an update at the session midway. Currently, weather radars do not have any rain predicted for this race. Very little chance, if any at all. We've seen wet racing before here at Watkins Glen in a myriad of other series. Let me tell you, it does get ugly. Oh, in the background there, that's the 41 of Valoria. What's happened there? On the formation lap, no less. The 488, number 41, has been spun around. Well, he spun himself around. Got a little too happy on the throttle up round the exit of turn 8. You can see there, back end just came away. I'm not really sure what's gone on there. Unlucky for the 41. Fortunately, he rejoins from the second row there as the formation process begins down towards turn 11. Just around the corner then, destiny awaits these drivers for round 2 of the championship. You can see the GT3s properly packed in like sardines there. A bit of a gap down the line where Luca Tamburini used to be before his disconnect. Down towards the line then. 23 cars in all across 2 categories for round 2 of season 3 of the HCCL Multiclass Championship right here in Watkins Glen. And we are green and racing here in Watkins Glen. Down towards turn 1, we go a little bit of a delay there on the timers. Straight down towards the 90. Great start by Nissan. Great attack there by Dion Helgalian. Tried to get himself to the outside. Had the momentum, but just not enough to stay with the Nissan. He keeps himself clear of the 41 of Anthony Valorio. Now taking up the helm of third place ahead of Corey Aiken. Pascal Stoltz makes the top 5 for Jaguar right off the bat. Looking further down the line, we see here towards the back of the field, fighting between Black and Korkamilakis for 10th place. Meanwhile, Mizin breaks away from Ota. Wells is up to 3rd by looks of it there. We'll try to get a double check on that. Pascal Stoltz runs out wide through the inner loop chicane. We see here Marco Gagliolo. Right behind him, Dennis Gonzalez. Up front there was trouble for Anthony Valorio. Yellow flags. The 41 caught out in the opening lap. Meanwhile, there's been a serious bleed over between the GT4s and the GT3s. We see here a trifecta of Aston Martins, Sulim, Ota and Chaperon Tirulance, all charging up towards the back end of Tom Wells. Vladislav Mizin still leads, but Tom Wells is in 2nd place with Ginetta. And turned around there, contact between one of the Astons and the Mercedes of Matthias de Munster back into yellow flags almost immediately. Getting a look here on the instant replay, we can see exactly what happened. And looking at it there from the back end, I believe that to be, that was Chaperon Tirulance made contact, Matthias de Munster into the wall. Yellow flags cleared out into green. We've seen a big mix-up towards the GT4 field. Przemak Zulim takes 3rd place. Vladislav Mizin leads in GT4 and now 2nd place in the GT4 category. Tom Wells with Ginetta. Taking a look out back, we can see Matthias de Munster, and he's not the only one stranded, as you can see just up in front there of Dennis Gonzalez and Ryan Chaperon Tirulance. That is Anthony Valorio in the 41 Ferrari 488. Taking a look up front, it's scallops from Helgalian from Aiken. Sutton 3rd, Sutton 4th. Up and ahead of J-Ron Martin, who had an ecstatic start there with McLaren up to 5th place. Alexander Hivrich not too far behind at all. Let's get on board with the 2 McLarens heading up through the S's. Trying to get on board with the McLarens here, but they're having a little bit of trouble locating them. Have honestly no idea how the game thinks that is fun at all to do menu navigation. Jaron Martin drops in behind Alexander Hivrich. We see there trouble for Steven Sutton out through turn 5, so even more trouble finds its way over to the GT3 field there. There in the package of the number 7. Now dropping in behind Pascal Stoltz. Steven Sutton drops down to 8th, then down to 9th, courtesy of Isai Palacios. What a brutal start then on all fronts. We see here Anthony Valorio carving his way up through the GT4s, currently stuck in behind the second place GT4 of Zhemak Zulim. Then he's got a very clear line of sight up front there to Vladislav Mizin, the leader of the GT4 category. Meanwhile, we see some side-by-side action down the line here. Looking up the inside, Andrew Canoro on Ryan Chaperon-Tirulance. You see there, up into Division 7th there for Canoro. Great move. Looking back over to the GT3s for a touch here. We see Scallops continues to lead the gap. Currently held in and around 1.1 seconds to 1.2 between himself and Dion Helge-Leon. These two carved away from the rest of the field. You can see just hanging loose in the background there, 4 seconds away. Corey Aiken in 3rd place for Ferrari. I believe we're about to see definitely a spot of action here heading down towards turn 1. Jaron Martin back into the top 5. Antonis Korkabilakis chasing from 6th. Pascal Stoltz right behind in 7th place. A 3-way fight for the top 5. Let's get on board with Korkabilakis with Porsche. Currently clashing with Jaron Martin. Watch here, he's eclipsed on all sides. McLaren up front, Jaguar out back, and the XK's got the run alongside the Porsche, so it may not be a case of a fight for 5th. It may be a defensive fight for 6th, as you can see there, leaping 2 positions for the price of 1 as we head in towards the inner loop chicane. How on earth has Pascal Stoltz done that? 2 for the price of 1, could be 3 up in front. Hivrich has trouble. Let's cut away here from the Porsche. We need to see what the Jaguar is seeing. The battle of 4th place with Hivrich in tow. That Jaguar is absolutely flying. In what has been the opening 5 minutes of racing, that is absolutely diabolical. Meanwhile, the 813 trouble down to the inner loop chicane for Luca Tamburini. Pascal Stoltz in total flow state there. I have never seen the like out of Jaguar. Signaling to the right. Is there something the matter with Alexander Hivrich's McLaren? Could he be signaling Stoltz to move on through? You can see what looks to be, at least in the body language for the car, definite signs of damage. You see there in the background, Korkabilakis challenging Martin. Meanwhile, Isai Palacios right behind. For Pascal Stoltz, he's broken up and away from the rest of this group by a long shot. Still fighting here with Alexander Hivrich for 4th place on the grid. An exhilarating start. Meanwhile, in the background, I think we're about to see some fighting going on here. Meanwhile, the 813 ran into even more trouble. Luca Tamburini is into the pit lane. That could be them out of this race. We just caught on board here with the number 4, Antonis Korkabilakis, fighting with Jaron Martin. They were side by side down the opening straight, in through turn 1 and 2 and 3, up through to turn 4 at the S's. Korkabilakis holding strong here, hoping to have a chance over the McLaren. Meanwhile, I am told as well of a fight going on up front. Stoltz getting ever closer to Hivrich. Korkabilakis chasing Martin in through the inner loop chicane, catching on board with this screaming Porsche number 4. Martin runs out wide. This could be the look up the inside. Korkabilakis has been waiting for. In through to turn 5 we go. Side by side on the run in towards turn 6. It's contact into the wall. Goes the number 4 and the number 1. Absolutely brutal. Look at that impact. He was up on 2 wheels, collides with Sutton. It's disaster at turn 6. Out through the exit of turn 5, clashed into the wall there. You can see up off of all 4 wheels went Jaron Martin, the number 4, hugging the wall. That was absolutely feral. Over in a millisecond, destroyed between the pair. You see here the current state of Antonis Korkabilakis' Porsche, and it is in ruins here. Trying to make its way. You can see they're scraping across the camera's field of view. Out through turn 7. He can't find any ability to steer the car. Steering system is broken. And that could be the number 4 out of this race. We'll wait for updates out of the pit crew for Antonis Korkabilakis, because that is not a good look. We've been told the car's been recovered at this time. Meanwhile, you can see Steven Sutton, a driver who was actually technically hit by that passing incident, finds himself still right behind Isai Palacios and within a chance here to look at 6th place. Looking down into the GT4s, we do find ourselves with a potential scope of fighting here. Matthias de Munster right behind Modest Ach in the 777 Porsche. 222 Porsche, sorry. I was thinking of the 777 Aston Martin. That's Ryan Charpentier-Roulant behind. He too is also fighting with Rodaris Castillo. Up front, you can see a fight going on there. Asahi Ota versus Tom Wells. This could be one to watch. Let's stay on board with the Battle of Britain, as it were. Aston Martin versus Ginetta. Warwickshire versus Leeds. We're also informed of another car in the pit lane at this time. We see here side-by-side action. Ota up the inside on Wells. Wells has got the manoeuvrability to his aid. He's the lighter of the two, and he uses that to great leverage. Out through the inner loop chicane. Great defense by Ginetta over Aston Martin. On board with Wells. This is in the fight for Division 4th place at the moment. These two properly thrashing each other through Sector 1. Hard but fair between the two British icon cars here. The Ginetta G55 and the Aston Martin V8 Vantage. And two iconic drivers to go with as well. Tom Wells and Asahi Ota. We see here, this is the trouble that Wells finds himself with. He just can't find enough engine power over the Aston Martin. 3.7 litres is inherently smaller than 4, and there is no replacement for displacement. You and I know that way too well now, especially in GT4. In spite of all of this, though, that plucky little Ginetta is keeping with. And as I'm told there, this is actually upgraded now to the fight of third. One of the cars that was brought into the pit lane was a GT4, hence why it shoved the drivers down a peg to fourth. In the time we first started covering them, now we've been given the information necessary to tell you that this is for third on the grid. So this is all for the podium here. You can see in the background, the GT4s have not gone anywhere. You can see not too far at all is Dennis Gonzalez on his first ever race inside the top 5 on debut. Not too shabby at all. Asahi Ota could be looking to have the run here over Tom Wells. Let's see if we can catch on board with the Aston Martin in this charge right now. Watching on with Asahi Ota. Gluing himself there to the tiny Ginetta. On the run in towards the inner loop chicane. Bear in mind, this is the exact same situation he found himself in not too long ago. And again, the Ginetta has the upper hand through the inner loop. Frustratingly so, Asahi Ota slots back in behind to third place. Well, hang on a tick here. No, this is for fourth place. So this is why it was so confusing to begin with. It shows him in third in division. And it also shows Wells third in division, if I'm not mistaken. Even though both of them are behind two other GT4s. Yeah, apologies there. That is a very bizarre one indeed. Let's get back on board with Ota v Wells. This is for third. Nonetheless, it is for third. There's no mistaking that part. But it shows both of them already in third, which is a very bizarre point. Now it shows him in fourth. See, this is... I can't handle ACC sometimes, honestly. It makes you think you're going mental. In towards turn 8 we go. These two, of course, spent the entirety of the GT4 Challenge clashing heads here. They understand each other's game rather implicitly. They're two drivers with a lot of history together, sharing the same grid, sharing the same championship fights, sharing the same, actually, at times, I'm pretty sure, podiums. Little scrape with the wall there, never hurt anyone. And in the case of the 33, still finds himself within half a second of Tom Wells, who is putting up a brilliant defense of the podium. Taking a look then around the field as we stay on board with the number 33. In the scope of things for GT3, Mr. Scallops has broken away from Dion Helgalian by 2.3 seconds at the last interval, leading the charge in the 394 Nissan with the fastest lap. Dion Helgalian second, with Corey Aiken up to third. And Alexander Hivrich in fourth. Pascal Stoltz in fifth. Not too far away at all. Taking a look at the previous interval, 1.269 seconds as we cut back on board with that fight for Division 3rd down in GT4. Then behind Stoltz, Sutton 6th, Palacios 7th, Black 8th, and Valorio 9th. A heavy toll there of DNFs in GT3. not much can be said the same of in GT4. We see plenty more cars now actually outnumbering the premier category of GT3. Vladislav Mizin leads the charge ahead of Zhemak Zulim, who made a way through the field really quite graciously there in the 91. Well, Zhemak, he's going to be able to take away a very solid result. He's 8.4 seconds at the previous interval away from this fight on your screens at the moment. The fight for third place between Tom Wells in the Ginetta, number 12 in the Golf Racing colours. Then right behind him there in the Aston Martin Racing colours, the number 33 V8 Vantage of Asahi Ota. Right behind them, you can see newcomer to the grid, Dennis Gonzalez. In that bright high-vis green number 14 AMG. Takes a little bit of a run-off through turn 8, I should say, sorry. But he is P5 in division. Marco Gaioliolo side by side with Matthias de Munster on their way in towards turn 9. Behind them, you can see Andrew Canoro and Modest Ach, not too far away at all from their fight at the moment for 6th. Now to pick up on potential fights as well. Of course, you've got this one here for Division 6. You've got the Division 3rd fight going on at the moment as well. And you've also got the overall 4th fight between Hivrich and Stoltz there on the exit of turn 8 as we speak. Matthias de Munster shoots into the pit lane in the number 69 Mercedes. Early pit stop then after just under 15 minutes of racing here in Watkins Glen. In the meantime, Asahi Ota takes the helm off of Tom Wells. Up to 3rd place goes the Aston Martin. What can Wells do this time around? In our efforts to try and have as many eyes in every place at once, we sadly missed out on that move up towards 3rd place for Asahi Ota. That's not to say that he's shaken loose away from Tom Wells upon making that move. We see that in through the inner loop chicane, that Ginetta is unparalleled. Really, in the case of that Ginetta as well, I mean, to quote, I believe it was Jeremy Clarkson talking about the Lotus Exige, it corners like a housefly, that G55. You can never see a more truer explanation of that down through the inner loop chicane. It just sort of buzzes on through. It seems completely unbothered by the rest of the circuit. It's really in these longer sweeping corners, of course, have been designed over the years for Grand Prix, for namely stock car racing, cars that didn't have very advanced steering systems, if any assisted steering at all. Cars that were heavy, some of which off the factory floor, well north of 2 tons. It's designed to slingshot the car around, so the heavyweights can have their fun. The little flyweight cars like the G55, like the Alpine A110, and moreover like the 718 Cayman, find their luck in and around sections like this where they have to take the consideration of slowing down, where they have to value maneuverability. Namely, that inner loop chicane is the great divide when you see fights like this. A slightly heftier Aston Martin up against the Ginetta. And let's be completely honest with ourselves, the Aston Martin is not exactly, you know, this juggernaut of a vehicle. It just happens to be one by relative comparison. This is among the smaller cars Aston Martin produced in its time, not including the Signet for obvious reasons. Looking around the field, we see Odaris Castillo being caught up by Mr. Scallops. A little bit of a hold up there through turn 2. He was trying to get out of the way, just didn't want to run into the wall himself. That has hampered Scallops' lead of things just by a little bit there, because Dion Helgelian isn't going to find too much difficulty now getting up and around the Aston Martin. He'll have a slightly better chance of things when he runs up onto the number 70 in towards the inner loop chicane and then into the outer loop corner at turn 5. Castillo here finds himself in a bit of trouble. You see the 45 running high and around turn 5. Off goes Helgelian. New fight to consider down in GT4, Gonzalez v Wells. Now, of course, having been shaken out there from a fight between himself and Asahi Ota for Division 3rd place, Tom Wells now finds himself dropping into the iron sights of the newcomer to the grid, Dennis Gonzalez, in the number 14 AMG. There could be the chances here for 4th place, not far from now, for the number 14. They're out through turn 8. Looking up into the GT3s, we see Mr. Scallops navigating traffic. Now, we saw a little bit of that hiccup earlier in his efforts to get around Odaris Castillo. Other than that, not an awful lot to comment on inside of the GT3s. They took a heavy beating in the start of this race. The opening 15 minutes did thin out the crowd for GT3 quite a bit. We're now down to only, looking at it here, 9 vehicles in the GT3 grid. nearest fight would be Stoltz v Hivrich, but as we've seen, that started off with Stoltz behind, so highly unlikely that there is a fighting chance here for Hivrich. We saw him have a little bit of trouble earlier on. He's had his right side indicator on, I think for, what has it been now, 18 minutes. Very curious. Maybe he just really wants to go into the pit lane, but hasn't made his mind up about it yet. Truly a mystery. Really, the majority of action is happening down in GT4. We see here, Modest Alk versus Andrew Canoro. This is for 7th place. We'll stay on board with the Porsche. Looking up the inside in towards the inner loop chicane. This is where Porsche has a good advantage, and it's contact between himself and the Mercedes. Fortunately, with the tremendous amounts of runoff, not a great deal of an issue between the two. However, it has kicked away the chances of a fight for 7th right about now. We see Corey Aiken filtering his way through. It has also opened the taps up just a little bit for Odaris Castillo to catch up. Now 4.7 seconds away from the 222. Wells definitely has to start considering defensive options now because he's 2.3 seconds away from Asahi Ota, who has started to open the taps up on that leading pair, Przemak Zulim and Vladislav Mizin, in the 91 and the number 2. But Tom Wells down in 4th place. He is going to have to start considering, how do I fend off Dennis Gonzalez for 4th place. See, joining us in chat there, Harrison Yao from the AXRL Kyle Army race that we covered earlier on this morning. Would have been afternoon their time. Again, still boggles my mind to try and wrap my head around the 11-hour time difference. It was 8 a.m. when we started. It was about 7 p.m. of the same day. And it still boggles my mind. See, oh, for Tom Wells, turned around by Dion Helgen-Leon. That opens the gaps up here for Dennis Gonzalez. He just swings on through. I'll have that off you. Thank you very much, says Gonzalez. What on earth happened there? Let's get a look at this on the replays. Hopefully we capture just the trailing end of it. In towards turn 1, we see GT3 has the inside and just sort of swings across his nose. I'm not really sure what else there is to really be said there. Now, it is a bit of a semantics argument when we get into the topic of blue flags and blue flag etiquette. Every league handles it differently. In this case, I think this is going off of at least what we understand just from any kind of GT race. GT racing, it does it here closer to the more endurance style of racing etiquette when it comes to blue flags, which is it's the responsibility of the overtaking car to make sure that it's done safely. But I think in that situation, there's not really an awful lot Helgen-Leon can do. He positioned himself at the inside. There wasn't a great deal he could have done past that point because the Ginetta was already dead set in its mindset to turn. You can see there. Was he close enough, though? That's the real question. Was he expecting the number 12 just to completely back off the line with a car on his tail? I would say it's a racing incident. I don't necessarily think that it's that it has really done an awful lot there. 707 is in trouble down at turn 5. Moreover, in the time we've been spending discussing this, Tom Wells has caught back up to Dennis Gonzalez, and that fight for 4th place can once again begin. All the best to the viewers in chat tuning in from AXRL. We hope you did enjoy the show earlier on today. You see here running out wide is Gonzalez. So for Wells, this does open up an opportunity to fight back. Let's see what he can do. On board with Tom Wells. This is in the fight for Division 4th. Up through the S's. He's clung to the slipstream of that number 14 Mercedes. Here, as we get onto the straightaways, that AMG engine just gets to open up just a little bit, and that's what keeps him at arm's length. If this was into a heavy braking zone, he could definitely try his chances, risky as it may be, but it's in through this section where he's able to get any kind of advantage over that Merc. In the same story where he was able to hold Asahi Ota at arm's length throughout their fight for Division 3rd, it's all to the same here for him to fight back onto the Mercedes for 4th. We see they're getting up and around. That's Pascal Stoltz up along the inside, trying to exploit an opening there through turn 6. He just can't find the momentum to do so. The Mercedes puts the hammer down. That twin-turbo V8's nothing to trifle with. Up through turn 7 at the toe. Wells will be trying absolutely everything in the book here to stay with that Mercedes. He does have the pace for it right now. He just needs straight line speed. Sadly, he can't conjure up extra miles of an hour, even in the slipstream. Or I suppose miles an hour, not miles of an hour. Common misconception. Looking up the inside in towards turn 9. Could this be him getting his elbows out? Clipping the curbs there. He's going to lose a little bit of steam in the number 12. Yeah, can he hold on long enough, though, on the run in towards turn 10? It looks likely. Up the inside, Tom Wells, but just snipped across the nose. The Mercedes runs up and around him. This has got to be frustrating for the number 12 at this time. Try as he may, the Mercedes has got him dead to rights for engine power. Stop-go 30-second penalty now being served by Stephen Sutton. It's a great little scrap we're seeing here between Gonzalez and Wells. We see exiting the pit lane behind them by the looks of it there. I'm pretty certain that is Isai Palacios in the 11 BMW GT3. Bear in mind, Palacios wants to get a wriggle on here, weaving his way through. Muscled the GT4s out of his way. Number 7 cleared of stop and go, so that's all great news for Stephen Sutton. In towards the inner loop chicane we go. Wells still pursuing with reckless fervour here to the number 14 of Gonzalez in front. Meanwhile, we take a look around the field. We do have some other fights going on at this time. Hivrich. Actually, no, that's not a fight. He's just near to a car. Back on briefly here with Wells. It's the closest fight on track at the moment of any two cars. Some fights to consider as well. That gap has started to whittle down there between Aiken and Helge Lee, and there could be the opportunity for that Ferrari to come and strike at the Ford on the front row. More on that as it develops. Staying here down in the GT4s, where a lot of the action has been very, very densely packed. Out through turn 8 we go. Bear in mind, coming up on about 5 minutes from now is where we're going to see the bulk of our pit stops. We see holding the inside. So he had a very poor run out through turn 9 in towards turn 10. Gonzalez tries to stick his elbows out here. He's trying to defend vehemently now for his position on track. We're starting to see the signs of flagging here on those tyres in that Mercedes, but what we're not seeing anything yet is anything run out grip-wise for that Ginetta. Both of them taking ample runoff there through turn 1. That's all totally legal. They can do that. Heading up through turns 3 and 4. That V6 screaming its heart out. Try as it may, though, it just can't find any more pace. It's all in the corners from here on out for Wells. He's got it dead to rights over most cars on this grid, but the moment you stick him on the straight between turns 4 and 5, that Ginetta, bless it, it's a deer in the headlights. So you see there, Anthony Valorio slowly making his way back up through the field after his off at turn, it was between turns 4 and 5 on lap 1 of the inner loop chicane. You see there, the Mercedes giving way for the 41. Now he's got to play this very tactically. He can't give too much room to Valorio because he'll compromise his own line and he'll allow Tom Wells the completely open set of doors to just walk on through back to 4th. A little bit of stuttering there from the cars. Nothing to worry about at this time, heading up towards turn 9. This is an area where last lap Gonzalez had a poor exit on the run in towards turn 10. Doesn't make the same mistake twice. Now we're coming up onto the final couple of laps before the midway mark of this session. Feasibly the penultimate lap before most drivers would anticipate a run to the pit lane. Now there is no stint limit in this championship, but with that mandatory pit stop, a lot of drivers are aiming to get this one straight down the middle. See Toothless 453298 joining us in chat there. And if I'm to believe the same, it would be the same Toothless who won most recently in the GT3 wing
of the AXRL 3 Hours of Kyle Army. I'm hoping I'm right. I really am hoping I'm right. Otherwise, it's just someone with the same name. And I look crazy. Out through to turn 4. Up towards the run of the inner loop chicane. These two still glued to each other here. We couldn't get a crowbar in between the pair of them to pry them apart. They have been inseparable in their fight for 4th. In the background, we see Stephen Sutton carving his way through the GT4s. Just got up and ahead of the Alpine of Marco Gaioliolo. In towards turn 6, and you start to see, and now I was saying this earlier, that there weren't really many telltale signs of trouble tyre-wise for the Ginetta. It's because it doesn't really tend to run itself out of ground in the same way the Mercedes does. It ends up suffering, and we saw it just there, a little inkling of it through turn 6, is that four-wheel understeer. Look, the whole car starts to slide away, like it's almost on, like it's on a sheet of black ice almost. Whereas the Mercedes, it's much more apparent. It's just understeer past the apex. We see for the Ginetta, just because of how light it is, it does tend to struggle in a much more almost comedically exaggerated fashion compared to the Mercedes. See there, a little step of oversteer. That's for Stephen Sutton right on the tail here of Tom Wells in towards turn 10 and 11. Meanwhile, into the pit lane, Przemek Sulim, the number 91 Aston Martin. We have a whole wad of cars into the pit lane at the moment, but these two opt to stay out. This will upgrade them up from a fight of what was 4th place, as we see in the pit lane at that time. Was Przemek Sulim, now up to 3rd place by looks of thing here. Looks of things, I should say. Taking a look at that field. Mizin still leading in GT4, Ota 2nd, Julim in the pit, so it does promote these two momentarily between Gonzalez and Wells to a fight of 3rd place. These two have been a fantastic offering in today's race here in round 2 of season 3, heading in towards the inner loop chicane. They don't show any signs of going anywhere away from one another. Meanwhile, yellow flags out. It's for the 777 car. That's Ryan Chaprintier-Roulance. Just trying to make sure we get the name correct there. Trouble for Aston Martin. So we're at the halfway mark of the race. We are coming up on that yellow flag. We will just briefly check in here to see that is the 777 in trouble. Now catching back on board with these two. As we saw just before we cut away was the number 12 side by side with the number 14. Sadly to no avail at turn 7. In towards turn 8 we go. Meanwhile, the race leading 3 there at the front. Scallop, Stoltz and Hivritz all into the pit lane. Bear in mind, Helgelian and Aiken both took pit lanes runs before. 777 still up in front. It is a rolling white flag now. Away from the yellow flags previously flown for the 777. Chaprintier-Roulance in big trouble there damage-wise. He'll be into the pits almost immediately. Will it affect much of the fight here going on for 3rd place? And if they stay out one more lap, it could very well upgrade to a fight of 2nd. Vladislav Mizin is into the pit lane. We can see coming in as well. Looked to have been was it Asahi Ota there? No, it was Chaprintier-Roulance. Now, this is the problem. Same colour of the car, and it is driving me a little... Well, it's not really the same colour of the car, is it? It's actually closer to his colour. Still, we're starting to see that massive influx of cars. Now, there's a significant chunk, up until very recently there with Modestak, of a lot of GT4s that just weren't making the change. They weren't jumping across into the pit lane at the dead-on halfway mark. A lot of them want to keep the ball rolling, see where things go here as their fights with each other. It's effectively 2 races happening in tandem. And that is really one of the best parts about GT multi-class racing. This has momentarily upgraded to the fight of 2nd place. Under strategy, they're liable to lose these positions back out because they've been spending a lot of time in each other's trade, in each other's sort of trade wind, as it were. Neither of these two have really been benefiting or directly detrimented by this fight, but it isn't going to be, in the wide scope of things, improving their standing in GT4. They're just going to be fighting with each other likely to be pushed back down to a fight of 5th place. They've been upgraded 3 positions since that point. Briefly cutting away from these two to see Anthony Valorio currently leading this race, having stayed out further than Mr. Scallops. Now is the opportunity for the 41, which spent the majority of its time towards the back of the field after that incident at the inner loop chicane, to really get the most out of the last of those tyres before he comes into pit. Past the halfway mark, no imminent threat of rain, so we did say around the halfway, just past the halfway mark, we would try and get an update on the weather. No chance of rain in the next 30 minutes. Still cloudy overhead. We can see an influx of Aston Martins into the pits. We've just seen there arriving as Asahi Ota, and then we see in the background very similarly coloured Mercedes, not an Aston. And that there is Dennis Gonzalez. Baptism by fire for GT4. That number 14 really showing some serious potential on this grid. We see, though, in centre mass of the screen, the 777 Ryan Chaperon-Tirulance in big trouble there. That is quite a mangled Aston Martin. Looking around the field, I think realistically the nearest fight is still going to have been, for the longest time, or at least was going to have been, between Wells and Gonzalez. Of course, Gonzalez into the pit lane. Wells out by his lonesome. So the grid will scatter for the next 10 or so minutes. They'll start to sort of reconvene for positions in the next 10 to 15, giving us potentially more fights to play with by the next... by the end of the race, in and around the last 10 minutes, I'd say, as we saw back in Barcelona. Did take some time for it to form back up. Valorio into the pits. So trying to catch on board here with Valorio. Into the pit lane goes the 41. That does leave Scallops to re-inherit the race lead. Going to catch on board then with the Nissan. Back up to the race lead then for Mr. Scallops in the 394. He is looking at the chances here in the next 25 minutes of his first race win in Season 3. Ahead of Dion Helgelian's win in Barcelona. In terms of GT4, it's a one-horse race at the moment. Vladislav Mizin is dominating that field. Shows very little sign of slowing down. You see getting up and around Anthony Valorio. Pascal Stoltz up to 4th place. Behind Helgelian. And moreover, in more recent news there, in terms of strategy, Corey Aiken is now up to 2nd in this race. We can go and catch on board with Aiken just for a moment here, up to 2nd place with Ferrari. Now, looking at the results out of last week's round in Barcelona, we will find ourselves staring down the sights once again of a Ferrari on the podium. Taking a look out of round 1, of course, that was Giacomo Marianelli in Barcelona who won. Who was on the podium, I should say, with Ferrari. It was actually Dion Helgelian that won in Barcelona. Get way too used to saying that. He was on the podium with Ferrari. So Corey Aiken looking to give Ferrari their best result of the season so far. 2nd place in the 44. He's 15.1 seconds from Mr. Scallops. Moreover, he's 5 seconds from Dion Helgelian, last round's race winner. Pascal Stoltz out by 11. You see there, that was supposed to be Marco Gaioliolo, and yes, there was a momentary blip in his connection to the server, but nothing to worry about. The Alpine still out on track at the moment, making his way out from the pit lane. See here, Mr. Scallops last lap, 1:46.870. Up against Modestac, that's 10 seconds faster. We must consider as well, could have been that pit stop in the midst of it all. Dion Helgelian, he's got clear line of sight down the opening straight to Corey Aiken in 2nd place. Moreover, you can see there in the background, it's the same story from Stoltz to Helgelian. There could be very well the argument in the next 23 or so minutes of these three potentially going head to head for P2. I would not rule that one out. You see here with the titular Alpine of Marco Gaioliolo. And fun fact as well, Nissan did play a hand in developing the engine in that little Alpine, as well as it of course did for the GTR. That 1.8 litre turbo inline-4 was a joint venture between Renault and Nissan. It's part of the wider Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi group. You see there the GTR carving its way up past Andrew Canoro, nearest in the iron sights here for a fight of 8th place with Marco Gagliolo with Alpine. Modest Ak 6.5 seconds behind, potentially to close on the Alpine by the end of this race. In terms of the podium down in GT4, I must say it's a pleasant surprise for the 91 here. He has played his cards very close to the chest, and Przemek Sulim currently in 2nd place in division. Shows that he's currently 4th. Now, let me just double check all of this here. And that is where we start to see the bulk of the times coming in. Now, this will be provisionally 2nd for Sulim. Let's not rule that one out, because we still wait upon 2 more GT4s to come into the pits. Tom Wells, who has gone the extra mile here to try and preserve position on the podium, up and ahead of any other drivers such as Asahi Ota, or for that matter Dennis Gonzalez, who is now in the rankings there, is dropped back to what is going to be a provisional 5th, unless anything can be done there for Wells. Into the pit lane goes the number 12. Same story currently applies to Eldaris Castillo. He's gone the extra mile, looking potentially at a, looking at the grand scheme, about a 60-40 stop, so it does about 60% of the race, then comes into the pits, then does the remaining 40%. The only other driver yet to have pitted besides these two is Stephen Black. As we see here, Eldaris Castillo's coming into the pit lane. Stephen Black, the last driver yet to have done anything pit lane-wise. The 707 down in 9th place. Technically has gained position in GT3 by nature of survival. Castillo then, and Wells for that matter, dropping to Mizin. Then Sulim. Then Ota. And then do we see redemption here for Matthias de Munster on the exit of turn 11? Well, Tom Wells is cleared for exit, but I fear it's all for naught. As you can see there, that's Matthias de Munster just to the right-hand side of the screen, whizzing past comms tower in towards turn 1. Now up the position from Tom Wells. Well, Castillo still stopped in the pit lane at the moment, yet to have been released. But Mizin, he's up into the lead of GT4. Sulim now 2nd place, as mentioned before, a little preemptively. Wells drops in behind Ota. De Munster, for that matter, we'll wait to see the full update for the GT4s. We'll pick that up in about 4 minutes when we're on to the final quarter hour of racing. Taking a look, though, with the likes of trying to catch on board here with Tom Wells throughout this grid. You do just quickly see here Corey Aiken inadvertently giving advantage over to Marco Gagliolo, now within 7/10 of a second of Andrew Canoro in towards the inner loop chicane. Now, Canoro will have a little bit of dirty air from that Ferrari up in front. So this actually plays quite nicely into Gagliolo's hands. This is for 7th in division. Down towards turn 5. You can see the Mercedes there was a little bit washed out on the run in because of the air kicked out from under his nose from the Ferrari. Moreover there, just emerging to the right-hand side, and that frightened me as much as I imagine it frightened Gagliolo. That is Dion Helgelian. See there up the inside on Canoro. This does open the door up for the Alpine to come and have an attack. Very, very close now to Canoro. So we are looking at that fight going on for 7th place in division. Mercedes versus Alpine. Toothless in chat asking, missed the comms and glad to see you back, and hopefully see you around, see you more around AXRL. Did you enjoy the Kyle Army race? There was a lot going on. Yeah, it's fantastic to be back with AXRL, even for that one-time event. There is obviously great curiosity from the managers at AXRL to pick back up where we last left off. Of course, we did work with AXRL for some time in the earlier stages when TRTN became its own operation outside of True Racing Revival. We still hold on to the original name because we didn't really want to rename the channel. We felt it was still relevant enough. Moreover, the name was too long. We wanted to put it as True Racing Television Network, which is what TRTN stands for, but it was too long, so we just stuck to the original. We see here side by side though for 7th place, just briefly out of the topic of discussion. Back into the fight for 7th place. Gagliolo gets the leg up over the Mercedes of Andrew Canoro up through to turn 4. And this is where the Alpine could be in trouble. That 1.8 litre turbo 4-pot hasn't got an awful lot of ground to stand upon on an engine twice its size. Actually, a little more than twice its size. As we see them out through turn 5, just to pick back up where we left off there. Yeah, it's been fantastic to come back and work with AXRL. We do hope to work with them more in the future, but obviously one of the major hurdles of that, with us being from the UK, with AXRL being an Australian league, is working around that 11-hour time difference. Really, it would only ever be a case where you'd be looking at weekend events. Now, we can be more flexible with that. I've got more open hours as of recently, so I can definitely make more accommodations, but it's a case of trying to figure out what works for everybody. It's not just about what works for us. We work in all manner of unsociable hours already. We work at, you know, upwards of 1 to 3 in the morning with our North American clients over at the Competizione Performance League, and we've been happily doing that for 2 seasons now, so I don't see any reason for that to stop. Same story for AXRL. It's really to their own discretion. If they ever want to come back to us, obviously that's what was the driving force before. They wanted to get us back on board because this was a big event coming up for them. They originally approached us, I think it was back for the race for Bondi. That was the Bathurst 3-hour. We couldn't accommodate for it at the time, which we still feel quite bad about because that would have been a great opportunity. Bathurst is a personal favourite of ours on TRTN. That would have been fantastic to come back to. But it came to be the case where this time around for Kyle Army, the timing was a little bit better. We were able to make room for that. You see here, Gagliolo, now 7th place. That battle for 7th starting to dissipate. So you see they're getting up and around him. Alexander Hivrich lapping up the track he goes. 5th in the race so far. Right now, 12 or so seconds away from that of Pascal Stoltz with Jaguar. Catching back on board here, we see that Wells now back up and ahead of Gonzalez, but in between the pair of them, you can see that is Pascal Stoltz. Momentarily held up in his efforts to escape Alexander Hivrich. In the pits at the moment, the 777 and the 707. Ironically, the 777 not feeling particularly lucky, picking up on the last 15 minutes of racing today. We're still on board once again with Wells v Gonzalez as we pick up on their second and possibly final chapter of competition here in the second half of the race today. On the last 15 minutes coming up, we see what the grid looks like as of current. Mr. Scallops leading by 14.9 seconds, looking surefire for a victory with Nissan today in the GT3 category. Corey Aiken looking at Ferrari's best result of the season so far, 2nd place in the 44-296. Dion Helgelian once again onto the podium, his 2nd consecutive podium since the start of the season, albeit a far cry of the race when he took in Barcelona tooth and nail in that 45 Mustang. Pascal Stoltz fought things back to top 4, moreover into that top 5. Alexander Hivrich, Anthony Valorio, great comeback drive, definitely a likely candidate for a driver of the day vote. He's fought back through certain adversity there in the 488 to put himself into the top 6. Really, as we see here out through turn 11, not too far off a shout of Alexander Hivrich. They're on the same straight of tarmac just as he exited turn 11. We saw going down in towards turn 1 was Hivrich. Palacios in 7th, Sutton in 8th. And then we get into the topic of the GT4s. Vladislav Mizin leading once again, looking at consecutive victories in GT4, 1 in Barcelona, and then the next 13 or so minutes looks likely to win again. Zhemak Sulim looking at his best result of the season, 2nd place and his first podium visit with Aston Martin. Asahi Ota looks to make it an Aston Martin 2 and 3, currently 3rd place on his first event back into the season. Last time we saw him in an HCCL race was back in the Carousel Cup. Matthias de Munster, Division 4th and Division 5th at the moment for Tom Wells. Closely fought between himself and Dennis Gonzalez. These two have put on an absolute riot of a show. The centre talking point of the GT4 field throughout round 2. Likely a future talking point throughout the season. Marco Gagliolo not far off their trails at this time. With Alpine, recently had his own set of fights with Andrew Canoro. Further behind them, Modest Ach and Odaris Castillo. Still in the pit lane at the moment on what looks to be potential retirement of today's round, the 777. Ryan Chaparentier Roulants. Super Motorsports asks, will there be commentary for the 2.4 hours of Kyle Army in 2 weeks? That's the charity event, isn't it? Yeah, the 2.4-hour Kyle Army, the charity race for St. Jude's, yes. We wanted to make sure we could get that follow-up sorted out. And we wanted to... really, we wanted to make it up to HCCL. We do feel quite bad about what happened in Spa. Now, admittedly, that has been a bit of a... It was a hurdle. It was definitely a hurdle. And I think I'm happy enough to talk about what happened. It was the Xbox, at the end of the day. It was never a case of whether or not we were willing. We were more than willing. We were actually quite happy to do charity events. We have no issue with doing that. And we were on board with the project every step of the way. We were able to make the time for it. But when push came to shove, the technical capacity for ACC, especially on Series S, is capped out at about 30 cars. Now, that's what the server sizes have them capped out to, but leagues time and time again have found loopholes in the technology to bring the current limit of cars well above that, and we've already covered races where it's well above that. I mean, look back through some of our coverage of the XCL Pro Series, you'll find grids well over 30 cars in size. And the problem is on console, unlike PC, there's no segmented rendering. You don't render just the stuff around you. For console, especially on the spectator mode that we use week in, week out for our work here on TRTN, you have to render all of it at the same time. So when you had 50 cars in the 2.4 hours of Spa on a track that is the largest FIA Grade 1 complex ever devised, it was basically like setting off a hand grenade inside of the GPU. And we weren't the only ones with that problem as well. A lot of Series S users struggled for connectivity in that race. And that ultimately is what sort of set them on the path here for a smaller track. It's a little bit more light on the processing power for Series S users. And really, at the end of the day, it was a case where we never had to stress test our Series S before, because we stream via Series S on TRT and we don't have a Series X. I'm looking to get one absolutely now, especially after what happened there in Spa, because I never realized there was a hard ceiling for this. I really did think you could push the envelope out quite a bit and the game would be fine. I don't know why, and that's a very silly mindset to have, because looking back upon it, of course, you put 50 cars on the largest ever FIA Grade 1 track ever devised, and you have to render all of it, all of their positions, all of the physics and rendering and models. You don't get LOD, you don't get levels of detail that change from distance to distance like you do on PC. You have to do the full Monty, effectively, and it just doesn't work. It sadly just doesn't work for consoles. But, with that being said, obviously a lot more work has now been put into figuring out what are the hard limits of ACC, what can these leagues handle at this time. And with the 2.4 hours of Kyle Army coming up, not far from now, the HCCL charity race for St. Jude's Children's Hospital, that we will be covering here on TRTN. It's already in our schedule to do so, and we're looking to make sure that gets underway. It should, you know, fingers crossed, touch on wood, whatever have you, should work as intended. You see here a fight, Kenoro Viak down in GT3. Let's get on board with these two. 9 minutes left to go in the session. Currently fighting for Division 8th. Kenoro on the defensive, Aka on the offensive. Porsche versus Mercedes in towards turn 7 we go. To answer the question as well for Super Motorsports, if there won't be commentary, it's not a big deal. It was also a case as well where it was not only an issue for us, but even for the players themselves, they have to render everything on their console. So it was a case where we couldn't access it, which, you know, that's fair enough. They can operate without commentary. That's not the end of the world. But then the players couldn't get in either. So that's where they drew the line. That's where it had to be reconsidered at the time. A lot of people who were on Series S couldn't make their way into that event. They wanted to participate and they wanted to contribute, but they couldn't. And that's where the issue arose. From our point of view, we wanted to broadcast the event because it's something we do believe is a good cause. You know, it's something we want to support and we're willing to support. And then push come to shove, we come to the event, and if we can't render it, we can't cover it. That's the sad reality of it. But we're looking to make right on that. And we're looking to get the 2.4 hours of Kyle Army underway not long from now. That's the hopes, at least. That's something we want. I think it's both us and HCCL want that to happen. We want to wrap things up there because it didn't go the right way through Spa. Kyle Army can definitely be the redeeming part of that. I think from what I remember as well, well over $150 was raised in Spa, and I think even more can be raised from that thereafter. I think it's a good cause to support there. More on this at the moment, though. 8th place still up for grabs. Canoro v Arc on their way in towards turn 7. Christian LeBay in chat saying, I think we should bring back the Camaro and give a go at Mizin then for next round. That's a curious sight there. Of course, Christian LeBay was the GT4 Challenge champion on HCCL with the 119 Camaro. Looking at a potential return in Indianapolis next Saturday. That could be one to watch then. That's going to make for an interesting third round. So far, so good, though, in the first of 2 in the American doubleheader. 6.5 minutes left to go then here in Watkins Glen. It has been a fantastic round so far, but really I'd say talk of the paddock has been GT4. They have really shown up GT3 today. They've had plenty more battles. Now that's not to say GT3 hasn't had any battles, far from. It's been a case where the GT4s have had these longer, much more involved battles. I think highlight of the day has easily been that of Gonzalez versus Wells. That was arguably one of the best fights we've seen so far, and from what the data is telling me here, they're not far off it happening again with 6 minutes left to go. Now we see somewhat of a follow-up act here. Porsche versus Mercedes in the form of Modest Duck versus Andrew Canoro. We've been watching with Canoro for some time, but let's see if we can get a look on board with the attacking side of this fight here. On with the Porsche of Modest Ak. He's been slowly worming his way to the inside here for some time. He's waiting for his opportunity to strike, ailing to the element of surprise. 5 minutes left to go then. And so far, fights to consider. Helgalian v Aiken ongoing for second place. We've been watching with the fight of Division 8 between Ak and Canoro. I think we will have to cut on board with these two here. Helgalian versus Aiken. Ford versus Ferrari. We see meanwhile as well what's left of the fight between Gonzalez and Wells now fizzled out to a 2.2 second gap. Modest Ak still in pursuit of Andrew Canoro, but let's go and catch on board with the fight on the GT3 podium. Getting a look on board there, and this is from the point of view of Dion Helgalian, last round's race winner, charging at the possibility of second place here with 4 minutes to spare. That 394 Nissan GTR of Mr. Scallops has dominated in GT3 and is looking on the advent of his first win this season. Bear in mind, Mr. Scallops already looking to kick off his charge to consecutive championships here in HCCL. Winner of Season 2. Bear in mind, he's got this one to contend with here. Dion Helgalian. Looking at it at the moment, we just saw the number 70 as well have to clear its drive-through penalty. We'll stay on board here as things are definitely about to kick off in a full swing between these two. Helgalian versus Aiken, the fight of second place up in GT3. Now to consider this point as well, Helgalian, if he is to finish in third place, will fall in behind Mr. Scallops by the time we get to Indianapolis in round 3. If he manages to pick up second place now, the two will sit dead level for points. So those are the odds right now. And coming up onto the, what looks to be potentially the second from last lap, by the way that the timers are ticking at this time. Bear in mind, there are a few seconds slow at the top of the screen. As he crosses the line, there will still be one more lap after this one coming up here. That's according to the time set in by the 394. It's when they cross the line that decides the end of the race. There will be one more lap after this one coming up. That gives 2 laps starting from now for Dion Helgelian to attempt to catch Corey Aiken. It's all or nothing for the 45 Mustang. We'll catch on with them in just a moment's time, taking a look back around the field, namely to go and see what became of that fight between Canoro and Ack, and you can see now the Porsche up in the lead of that fight for 8th place. Looking from the defending point of view here, there is going to be a lot of pressure now on Corey Aiken. Not only does he stand the chances here to become the best result so far for Ferrari at 2nd place. Previous record was held by Giacomo Marianelli in the last round just gone. Bear in mind, he's only got 1 round to play off of. Moreover, it's going to be a significant boost to his own points coming out of this round. Aiken finds himself 9th in the championship. Previous result was 9th place. This would be a serious boost for his confidence heading in towards Indianapolis next week. So I think we'll watch with these two for the remainder of this next coming lap. We'll be catching on board with the 394 towards the end of the next lap to see them to the checkered flag. That fight of 2nd we see there eclipsed by the lapped car in the foreground. That's Stephen Sutton and the number 7. Corey Aiken with the world's weight upon his shoulders here for Ferrari. In towards turn 9. Now he needs to get shot of that Ford ASAP, and you can see he's struggling to find the position there. That is all to Helgelian's gain. In towards turn 10 and 11. Now bear in mind, in these tighter sections of the track, it's not too difficult for both of them to become caught up by the car up in front. Sutton can't find any room to move away from Aiken and Helgelian at this time until we hit the opening straight. Moreover, at that time, he's kept the foot firmly in the bulkhead of the car up until just now. Could that have been the slingshot necessary for Helgelian to look up the inside as we head in to the final lap? In through turn 1 we go. He's definitely got the chances of it. Corey Aiken practically being pushed up towards turns 2, 3, and 4. He's to the outside. Through goes up on the inside there. Dion Helgelian with Ford. In the last lap then, Helgelian up to 2nd. He's looking to equalise on points by the time we get to Indianapolis. And you can see the world's difference that momentum up through Sector 1 makes. Heading in towards Sector 2 at the start of the inner loop chicane. Corey Aiken stranded out in 3rd place. Up in front of them there, you can see Andrew Canoro down in the GT4s. We saw him previously in that fight with Modestak for 8th place in division. Right now finds himself a spectator to this fight, and they're just momentarily blocking Corey Aiken. He'll be seeing red in his efforts to catch that Mustang. This could go all the way down to the wire, make no mistake of it. Corey Aiken and Dion Helgelian looking to take this one all the way to the checkered flag, and it can go any which way. Taking a look with these two, they're going to be scrapping all the way down towards the line. We're going to catch on board in just a moment's time here if we get the opportunity to get on board with Mr. Scallops. Heading down towards the line in, Mr. Scallops takes this first victory of Season 3, begins the charge back towards more championships on the way. We'll catch on with him in just a moment's time. We see here it's side by side between Aiken and Helgelian. This is all for 2nd place here in Watkins Glen. Around the outside goes the 44. Can he possibly look at a chance of 2nd place? It's contact down at turn 11. They collide. The 44 is into the wall. The 172 takes 3rd place. I don't believe it. Pascal Stoltz takes a podium with Jaguar. An absolutely explosive end to the race there for Corey Aiken. He'll be beside himself with rage in the GT3s. He is not happy with the 45. Meanwhile, Vladislav Mizin is not far from the line on what was an explosive end to fighting in GT3. Let's see how things pan out. A broadly different landscape for the GT4s. Unbelievable. I have never seen a race get quite that lively on the final lap. Mr. Scallops wins in GT3, and not far from now we see arriving out of turn 11 the GT4 leading the charge here. Back-to-back victories, continuing the lead of the championship for Vladislav Mizin, who wins in GT4. A brilliant result then for the Ukrainian talent. 2 on the trot now in this season so far. Looking potentially for that hat-trick by the time we get to the end of Indianapolis next week. Joining him on the podium then, Przemek Sulim in the number 91, Aston Martin, then returning to the field, onto the podium right off the bat. Welcome back to the grid, Asahi Ota, third place for the 33. We'll get the full results out in a moment's time, but oh my goodness, what a jaw-dropper that proved to be in the final chapters of this race. And there you can see the final results on screen at the moment. Mr. Scallops wins in GT3. Vladislav Mizin wins in GT4. Full results then. Mr. Scallops in first. Dion Helgeli in second. Pascal Stoltz third. Corey Aiken fourth. Alexander Hivrich in fifth. Very close to him there. We failed to pick up on that one. The 41 of Anthony Valorio just narrowly misses the top 5. Isai Palacios 7th, Stephen Sutton in 8th. Then in the GT4s, Mizin wins on the podium with Shulim and Ota with Aston Martin. Matthias de Munster 4th, Wells 5th, Gonzalez in 6th, Galiolo 7th, Ach 8th, Canoro 9th, and Castillo 10th. There's your DNFs as well. Stephen Black, Ryan, trying to make sure I get the surname right, Chaperin Tia Roulant. I don't know why that suddenly became an issue to me there. I've been saying it final day. Jaron Martin, and Antonis Korkomilakis, Luca Tamburini, and Nicholas Lisi. What an explosive end to racing here in round 2 of season 3 of the HCCL Multiclass Championship. A brilliant, brilliant fight indeed on all fronts, and a fantastic end to things from both categories. It has been bloodshed though here in Watkins Glen. The drivers now have a lot to think about between now and next weekend, looking at where we'll be for the next round of the championship. January 17th takes us to the birthplace of American motorsport, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That's going to be fantastic to see how that one unfolds. If today has been anything of a sign, it is set to be an incredible follow-up here in the American doubleheader of Season 3. That's all from us here on TRTN, and that wraps up Saturday for us. One more race until the end of the broadcast week. That'll be tomorrow's broadcast of the penultimate round of the NLRL Sunday League in Season 4. That's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care. Good night.